Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that's pretty wild. We're looking at how a detention order from way back during the Troubles in Northern Ireland has somehow sparked a massive constitutional crisis in the UK right now. We're talking about the country's highest court going head-to-head with its own parliament. So, how did this happen? How does something from the 1970s explode into a 2020s constitutional showdown? What we've got here is a real battle, pitting the UK's parliament against its Supreme Court. And it all forces this fundamental question: who really has the final say? It's a story about the past having this incredible grip on the present, and it all revolves around one man and a single signature from 1973. Okay, so to really understand what's happening now, we've got to trace the chain of events. It's a rapid-fire series of legal moves over just the last few years that really set the stage for this whole thing. Just look at how quickly this all went down. In 2020, the Supreme Court overturns a conviction from nearly 50 years ago on a technicality. By 2023, Parliament fires back with a Legacy Act specifically writing in sections 46 and 47 to basically erase the court's ruling. But then, boom, in early 2024, another court strikes back. The High Court says, nope, those sections are incompatible with human rights. This isn't just a legal disagreement. It is a full-blown, high-stakes tug-of-war between the UK's most powerful institutions. And here's the bottom line, the fundamental disagreement. Parliament is basically saying, hey, the court got our law wrong and we have every right to pass a new law to fix it. But the courts are saying, whoa, hold on. You can't just change the rules of the game after someone has already played and won. This gets right to the heart of the separation of powers. Who has the last word? So to get why this blew up into such a huge deal, we have to talk about the man at the center of the storm. Because this isn't just about any old case, it's about Gerry Adams. For decades, Gerry Adams has walked this incredible tightrope in public life. On one hand, he's the statesman, a key architect of the Good Friday Agreement that helped bring peace to Northern Ireland. But on the other hand, to many people, including historians, journalists, and former IRA members, he was a senior commander in the Provisional IRA. That's a claim he has always, and I mean always, flatly denied. And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the whole controversy, doesn't it? It was published in a prison newspaper, supposedly written by Adams under the name Brownie. His critics point to this as a straight-up confession. It's like the physical embodiment of all the unresolved questions that still swirl around his past. And that past brings us right to the core of this legal bombshell. You see, the Supreme Court's big 2020 decision, it had absolutely nothing to do with whether Adams was guilty or innocent. The whole thing, the entire case, came down to a tiny technical detail. Was the piece of paper that put him in prison without a trial back in 1973 legally sound? Now, you really can't separate this legal fight from the conflict that tore Northern Ireland apart for decades. The Troubles. That's the backdrop. It's the reason these laws even existed in the first place. This quote from the National Archives, wow. It really hammers home what was at stake. The Troubles weren't just some political argument. It was a brutal, bloody conflict over identity, over nationhood. And it was in this pressure cooker of an environment that the government brought in extraordinary powers, like internment, the power to just lock people up without even putting them on trial. So how did a 50-year-old case fall apart? Well, it all hinges on this honestly kind of dry legal rule that most of us have never even heard of. But it turned out to be the key that unlocked this entire constitutional crisis. Okay, the Carltonata principle. It sounds complicated, but it's basically the legal shortcut that lets a government actually function day to day. It just means that the top boss, the Secretary of State, doesn't have to personally sign every single piece of paper. Their officials can do it, and the law just assumes it's the same thing. Think of it like this. A company CEO can sign contracts, right? But she's busy, so a VP signs one for her. Normally, that's totally fine. That's the Carlton principle at work. But, and this is the big but, what if the company's own rules say that for this one specific type of super important contract, only the CEO can sign it? Well, then the VP's signature is worthless. And that, the Supreme Court said, is exactly what happened here. So the court's argument was simple. The power to take away someone's liberty, to intern them without trial, was so massive, so significant that it couldn't be delegated. The law required the personal attention of the Secretary of State himself. Since Gerry Adams' order was signed by a junior minister, the court said it was invalid, void. It was like it never legally existed. And if the detention was unlawful, then his convictions for trying to escape from that unlawful detention were also unlawful. So, as you can imagine, that ruling set off a bomb in the legal and political world. It led to this direct confrontation where Parliament basically decided to legislate its way out of the court's decision. Right after the court's decision, you had legal experts, like the folks at the think tank Policy Exchange, jumping in to analyze the mess. And they argue that Parliament was actually justified in pushing back, that it was correcting what they saw as the court getting the original law wrong. Their argument for Parliament stepping in really boils down to three main things. First, they say the claim was brought way too late. We're talking almost 50 years after the fact. Second, there's no evidence that the Secretary of State would have made a different decision anyway. And third, and this is a big one, Adams was also being held under a different, totally valid order when he tried to escape. So they argue the first invalid order is kind of irrelevant to the escape convictions. So you can see how this has just ballooned, right? It started with one man's detention order from 1973, and it spiraled into this huge debate. It's not just about Gerry Adams anymore. It's about how a country deals with its own painful history. And it's about that fundamental balance of power in the UK today. And that leaves us with this massive fundamental question. When a country is wrestling with its past, who gets the final say? Is it the lawmakers who are elected by the people? Or is it the judges whose job is to interpret the law? There is no easy answer here. And so the echoes of a 50-year-old conflict are still bouncing around the highest courts in the halls of power today.